So first I'm going to talk about batch record optimization. So very simple, this is not complicated. So if you want to improve your batch record, what kind of things are you going to do to it? So firstly, you're going to improve the layout of the document. So rather than having data entry all over the sheet, and I will show you an example in a moment, a thing you might do is you might put all the manual entries down one side of the document. You might use shading and data masks to make it easier for people to see where data is supposed to go. Certainly, you would aim to remove duplicate entries. Duplicate entries are extremely common in batch records. And also, you would look to avoid transcription. So transcribing something that's already written in one place and writing it on your batch record. So you will aim to avoid doing those things. And those are the main things you will try to do. What does that achieve for you? Well, firstly, it reduces errors. So you're reducing the opportunity for error. The second thing it does, obviously, if you have less entries and you're making fewer errors, it improves productivity. And the final thing that it does, very importantly, is it reduces review lead times because you're not continuously going back and dealing with those errors and going through correction loops. So batch record optimization, I wouldn't say it requires a genius to do it. It requires lots of work to do it, certainly. But certainly on the Pareto items that you manufacture, it's well worth doing. So here's an example, for example, of an old format of a batch record in a BSM project, or one sheet of a batch record, and here's what it was replaced by. So you can hopefully easily see how that's much easier to use, much clearer, and much less error prone. Okay, so that's the first item, improving the physical batch record itself. And the second item then is continuous incremental review. So what is continuous incremental review? Well, basically what it's about Muhammad going to the mountain rather than waiting for the mountain to come to Muhammad. So rather than waiting for batch records to arrive to the QA function in a volatile manner, QA people are going to the shop floor in a totally routine way every day. They're looking to review every batch every day. And in that way, they're actually leveling their workload. Because if you think about it, the pattern in which batch records arrive at QA is bound to be very volatile. Whereas, if you think about the number of entries that are made on a batch record every day in manufacturing, well, clearly it's not going to be completely level, but it's likely to be much more level. And that also applies in lots of other areas in Lean as well, by the way. For example, it applies in raw materials. So the pattern in which you receive raw materials from vendors is typically very volatile, but the pattern in which they're actually used is typically much more stable. The same applies, by the way, if you're, for example, if you're manufacturing bulk tablets. So the arrival of the bulk tablets, or the completion of the bulk tablets, is typically very volatile, but the pattern in which they're used, for example, the pattern in which they're blistered, is typically much more stable. So it's a very similar story with continuous incremental review. The amount of reviewing that actually requires to be done on a daily basis is actually quite level, but the pattern in which batch records arrive at QA is typically much more volatile. So by implementing continuous incremental review, you're actually leveling the work of QA people, and that's a very valuable thing to do on its own. Okay, the second thing, of course, that it does is it eliminates all the queues and delays in the typical, traditional batch record review process. So if you do a flowchart of your current batch record review process, you will find that it's got delays, lots of delays in it. Wouldn't be surprising to find 10 delay points in it. Obviously, when you implement continuous incremental review, at one fell swoop, you're getting rid of all those delays. So that's an example of what I talked about earlier on. So you're not using the flowchart or the value stream map as your starting point. You're using your understanding of lean techniques as your starting point and a clean sheet, basically, and you know what you're trying to achieve. And that's what continuous incremental review delivers for you. Okay, so obviously, if you're doing this, errors are quickly corrected and lessons are learned. So you've got a person filling the batch record. If they find out about an error they made 2 or 3 days later, or 4 or 5 days later, it's long after the event occurred, and it's difficult for them to learn the lesson. Whereas if they're learning about it very quickly afterwards, they know why they did it, and it's much more likely they will learn what they should do, and it's much more likely that they won't make the error again in the future. So if you're making fewer errors, obviously there will be fewer rework loops, and that's obviously going to help your productivity. Also very important is that because QA people are on the floor every day in that way, looking at batch records, if there is an issue, a deviation for example, that needs to be responded to quickly, QA people are finding out about it quickly and they're getting an opportunity to respond to it quickly. Now that's not just good from a speed point of view, it's also very good in terms of the quality of the investigations that people are going to do. So the quicker that you find out about something that's wrong and start the deviation process and start doing your investigation, the greater the probability is that you're going to achieve a good result and get a more accurate investigation. Okay, and I guess the final item, the final benefit of continuous incremental review is that because QA people are working in a very routine way every day on the floor with manufacturing people, the relationship between QA people and manufacturing people improves, and that can only be a good thing. Because the mutual understanding between them is very, very important to improving quality and improving compliance. So it's continuous incremental review, if you're not doing it already, is certainly something you should think about.